digital divide is still real.
Yeah.
And it's becoming an AI divide, a compute divide, but the root cause is the digital divide.
We must prevent a world of AI haves and have-nots.
The commitment that myself and the Catholic Church is pushing on AI ethics is simple, centered, and focused to one thing: to ensure that the human being is the center and remain at the center of such kind of evolution and development.
Our future is digital, and we have been hard at work over the past 2 years to ensure that it's open, safe, and secure, and that it leaves no one behind.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Susanna George, an international correspondent here at the Washington Post, and I'm excited to be joined on stage by Father Paolo Benanti. He served as Pope Francis's AI ethics advisor and continues to advise the Roman Catholic Church on AI. Kate Kallot, she's the CEO of Amini, a Nairobi-based climate tech startup leveraging AI and data infrastructure, and Amandeep Singh Gill, the UN Undersecretary General Envoy for Digital and Emerging Technologies. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
Father Benanti, some in the audience might be surprised to hear that this year the Vatican hosted executives from Google, Meta, OpenAI, Anthropic, and Palantir. Can you explain the Vatican's position when it comes to AI? And what's the message that you're hoping tech companies walk away from meetings like this with?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Well, actually, Vatican understand, or the Church is understanding such kind of transformation as the last ring chain of a long transformation that started with the Industrial Revolution. So in one direction, a simple another step in automation. But this kind of automation now is not just a matter of jobs and automation and task of jobs, but we touched languages. And with language, we build cultures. And with culture, we build also the social textile that allow us to stay together, that allow us to build community, that allow us to build trust. And so sea changes, to simple quote Shakespeare, on this kind of infrastructure and in this kind of societal building bricks can bring us to really unstable condition. And so the social teaching of the Church is a 112-year-long contribution that simply say that without justice, without participation of people, such kind of transformation can also reflect in a less stable society and a less peaceful environment.
And Kate, you've worked for some of the biggest tech companies, including NVIDIA and Intel. You've warned that the digital divide is becoming an AI divide. And I'm just interested in how your company now tackles that challenge.
Thank you for having me as well. It's a pleasure to be here. Like you mentioned, we actually started by being a climate tech startup. But now we've actually evolved into building sovereign data infrastructure for countries across the global south. And this happened a little bit by accident, because as we were engaging with our entire ecosystem, we realized that everybody across the global south is now feeling the emergency of adopting AI solutions, but doesn't even know where to start. So governments, private sector companies alike are all trying to scramble to understand, how do I make my data safe and how do I make my data sovereign, retain control over it? What are the types of solutions that I need to adopt? And what does this infrastructure look like? So when it comes to really how we've been operating and trying to close that gap, we realized that we're operating at the convergence of three things. There is a digital divide 2.6 billion people are still very much unconnected, and a lot of them are in our countries. There is a data divide. When you think about AI solutions today, a lot of the large language models and chatbots, most of it is trained by data that's scrapping from the internet, but a lot of people, a lot of our culture, a lot of our languages, a lot of our data is not online. We have societies that are not fully digitized yet. And then you have a compute divide, where Africa has less than 1% of the world's data center capacity. So if you don't have compute, you don't have GPUs, how are you going to train your own AI systems? So really understanding how we could support countries not just feel like they have to catch up, but understand what does a sovereign data and AI infrastructure looks like in the constraints that you have, and with the opportunities that you have locally. And that's what we have set out to do as a company.
Mr. Gill, you previously helped establish India's National Task Force on AI, and now you're the UN's top tech envoy. Where can AI further global development goals, whether it's in areas like education or agriculture?
Thank you for having me. And this is a great opportunity. So AI can accelerate sustainable development across all the 17 SDGs, from zero poverty, zero hunger, all the way to the green transition, managing plastics in the oceans, the health of our oceans. But I think to be able to do that, we don't need millions of specific solutions. We need millions of solution makers like Kate, and we need to enable the solution makers with the minimum capacity that's needed to innovate with AI, with data. And therefore, our focus at the UN has been on putting a floor under the AI divide, as we call it. This was a term used by the Secretary General's high-level advisory body on which Paolo, Father Benanti served as well. So I think I see immense promise, climate change, resilient agriculture, managing the new energy grids that would be needed. So we cannot do all of this without AI, but we can't just run after specific solutions. We have to enable the solution making.
There are many places in the world, many countries that I've reported on before I moved back to Washington, D.C., where reliable electricity is still a struggle. Considering this part of the world, Father Benanti, what must be done to ensure that AI contributes to closing rather than widening this global digital divide?
Well, when we talk about electricity, we are talking about global infrastructure or an infrastructure. During the time we moved, I was born and grew up in Rome, so water pipe are one of the first infrastructure that my ancient relative built. But that infrastructure allowed us to grow with a city that before Christ was 1 million of people, was able to host 1 million of people. And that kind of infrastructure is also something that is used to build a social contract. When I wake up every morning and I go to wash my teeth or drink some water, I don't think if there is a drinkable water, because I trust to people of my community that they make the control, that everything is good. When I fly with an airlines, I know that the control on their planes are made. So talking about infrastructure is talking about something that allows people to get by, but also something that allows society to be understood as a society. Then it becomes telecommunication and electricity. Now, to have such kind of effect, we rely on computation. And computation that arises on the East Coast of the United States with big company, during the 70s became personal computation on the West Coast. And that kind of, democratizing of computation transformed the reality as we see. And probably the last chain is the smartphone. But now with data center, we see a concentration again of computation. And with a digitized life, the people that will control the centralized computation can control all the life that we digitize. The bottleneck is the electrical power consumption. And we see that we have company here in the United States that simply both a nuclear power plant or the energy produced by a nuclear power plant subtracting from the grid. So is this a data center, a private asset that is pinging on public infrastructure, or has to be understood as a public infrastructure that with other infrastructure allow community to live and get by. Well, now the things move from ethics, that is my, academic field, to politics, and this is a total different reality, but the question has to be made in place. And the way in which we'll answer to this question will describe the society AI-enabled that we are trying to describe. Of course, energy is really different around the world, and this is a topic that we have to address to avoid much more inequality and division around the globe.
And Kate, in Africa, that's a continent that leapfrogged ahead of the world in the mobile revolution. In terms of infrastructure, does it have what it needs to maybe do something similar when it comes to real-world applications of AI?
Yeah, so right now there are a couple of data centers that are being built, and to the question of power connectivity, I actually think it's an opportunity for our countries, again, to show how to do it right. A lot of the energy in Africa is actually coming from renewable. If you think about Kenya's grid, where I live, 90% of the grid is clean energy. So it's coming from hydro, geothermal, solar. So by default, a data center that is built there that is actually powered by the grid will be more sustainable than what you will find in global north country or what's being built in global north countries. So I do see this as an opportunity for our countries to really show what it takes to build ethical infrastructure, but also support countries across the global north to understand how to organize themselves and also use some of those resources for the infrastructure they're building and deploying.
If I could jump in on the energy question, I think the energy transition, the green transition, and the digital transition have to go hand in hand. And there are tremendous opportunities, but we also have to think about not only where the energy is coming from, but what use are these data center capacities, AI factories are being put to. So more collaborative use of AI so that we don't have to replicate the same thing a million times over all around the world. Working together on data sets to solve common challenges, and more use of small language models. Large language models are very energy intensive, and they really don't move the needle on the sustainable development goals. So smaller models that are energy efficient, that can be on the edge on devices in low resource settings. I've seen that on the ground in Vietnam, in Africa, in India. I think that's the way to go.
And I'd like to ask you one more question about the UN. We are here in New York this week. You've been at the forefront of global governance when it comes to emerging technologies, figuring out where there is consensus. This morning, President Trump blasted the United Nations once again as ineffective. Do comments like this make it harder to build consensus among member states?
My experience has been that we've built consensus on these issues twice in the past 1 year, and in a very meaningful way. So last year at the Summit of the Future, 193 member states came together to adopt the Global Digital Compact and decide on 3 of the main recommendations from the advisory body: setting up a governance dialogue, setting up an international independent scientific panel, so we have science-informed policy, and third, moving forward on AI capacity to bridge the AI divide. And recently, those 2 mechanisms, the global dialogue and the scientific panel, their modalities were again decided by consensus. So there is sometimes a lot of noise and there are shifts, that's part of our reality today. But I keep my eye on what's creative, what's positive, and what keeps us moving. I think it's the 80th anniversary of the United Nations, and I was recently in the Muir Woods in North San Francisco, and the delegates were gathered there in that majestic setting where nature kind of commands all your attention. I think if we didn't have the United Nations today, we'll have to reinvent it immediately, because there are some problems, frankly, peace and security, climate change, AI governance, where we need to work together and have a neutral, convening platform at least to come together and do something about these challenges.
Father Benanti, you said, quote, that global governance is needed, otherwise the risk is social collapse. What do you mean by that? What is global governance in this case, and how close are we to getting there?
Well, be quoted by a Washington Post journalist could be dangerous, but in that case, actually is the result of my experience with United Nations work. And the idea is this, with this digital transformation, we enhance a lot what we can do and what we can't do. But the nature of the new artifact that we are building, software-defined artifact, some way can escape from a normal way to regulate it. So imagine what happened in your mobile phone. You own the hardware, but we simply get a license on the software. And usually in the law, when you own something, you have three rights. The right to use, it comes from Latin, the right to abuse, to destroy, but the right to have the fructus, that means to have all the possible gain that come from the use of that tool. But with a software-defined object, we know that fructus is subtracted to us and go to digital company, and also the abuse, the abuse remains, but the use could be limited. So this new reality is something that can escape any possible enforcement style that we have now, because you can have some object that is selling one market with one nation, but actually is outside of that market and that nation. So without a global governance, without a system that take us together in dialogue on this, it will be, like mouse and cat, or and there are some kind of paradise, or the worst scenario, Blackpool, in which you can see that the strongest simple violator could violate the rule of law.
And Kate, we've often seen technology developing faster than the rate of governance. How is the regulatory landscape evolving in countries like Kenya and other places in Africa?
So right now, a lot of countries in Africa are actually adopting national AI strategies, something that has been widely adopted by the global north before. And one of the things we're seeing is that the ecosystem is kind of shifting to really understand how to build regulations that is adapted to its own countries and the constraint at which it operates. By that, I mean that a lot of countries are looking into who actually is driving AI innovation on the ground, right? If you think about AI innovation in the US, it's mostly driven out of big tech, the large startups. If you think about Europe, it's regulatory driven with the EU AI Act. China, pretty much by the government. Africa, it's very grassroots, bottom-up, coming from the communities, developers and startups on the ground. So we're now seeing, and Kenya is a good example of that, we're now seeing governments actually turning to that local ecosystem to ask, okay, what does our AI ecosystem looks like, and what do you need as developers, practitioners, to be able to be successful? And I'm seeing this also happening in a complete other country, the Caribbean, for example, Barbados, where we've been doing a lot of work, also looking to understand how, as a small country, can I actually anchor a national AI strategy that is really centered on the problems my citizens are facing and put my citizens first? How can I actually bring in the skills that I need to develop solutions that are proper to the challenges that our country is facing today? And that's now it's accelerating, because I think that countries are seeing and feeling the emergency of really understanding, needing to understand what they need to put in place so that they're not left behind in the race.
And Mr. Gill, what do you think about that? What do you think is the prospects for self-regulation when it comes to technologies like AI?
I think that's a layer that we must leverage, self-regulation, ethical behavior at the level of companies and startups and entrepreneurs. But I think that needs to be supplemented by national and regional frameworks, especially on data protection. So I'm thinking of the EU GDPR here. I think there are tremendous challenges ahead on data. It's not only the creative side, how data is being used for training AI, but also protection as we move into more powerful AI agents that act on our behalf. So how is our personal data being used? And then there is a thin layer of global governance of AI with the scientific panel, where you have these informed assessments, so that we kind of find the right sweet spot between hype and horror, as so we swing sometimes. So I think those three layers have to work together. Self-regulation, I'm a little skeptical given our experience. We've seen with social media is supposed to do many great things, but then we've had some slippages. I think I worry a lot about, us slipping on this slope, lemming-like, walking into some areas, dark areas, whether it is public information, the work that the Washington Post and other newspapers do to keep us informed, keep our democracies healthy, and our dialogues and debates more informed. So I think we have to be careful that we don't leave it only to the goodwill of the private sector.
And Kate, how invested are these major global AI companies in African markets? And if there is a lack of investments, what could the consequences be of that?
I think we heard in the previous fireside chat that 86% of AI investments are going to US companies. So think about Africa being a really afterthought for a lot of this market. But to a certain extent, I think we need to deconstruct and reconstruct how we've been looking at AI innovation. Like, we've been extremely biased by this view that's coming from the US, from Europe, from big tech companies that are really leading the narrative and are making us think that there is no AI innovation being driven out of Africa or out of other emerging economies in the global south, when actually it's just a very different type of innovation. And when you start thinking about, okay, it's not fundamental research, the developers will not invent a new model architecture, they will not invent a new compute platform, but they will actually innovate in the applied AI landscape and how they're applying technology to solve communities and their environmental challenges. That's when we actually start thinking, okay, innovation is already there, and we need to support the local ecosystem. And if we switch our mind and we see it as more, we need to support local developers, local practitioners, rather than we need to make $100 billion into a new data center, then that's when I think global companies will manage to win the market, but also manage to help advance AI innovation locally.
And Father Benanti, I'd like to end on a question from our audience. This is from Rita Sphere from Maryland. She asks, how far could AI go in terms of predicting how human intelligence will evolve, and could it become an alternative to some religions?
Well, an easy one. Well, I know that when you play with Washington Post, some kind of question, right? Well, actually, first of all, my background is in engineer. Can AI have a conscience? Absolutely not. But for Turing question, and conscience is not a Turing computable problem, so such kind of machine cannot compute this problem. And that make, let's breathe. But the problem is another one, that we are a really unique species. We was able to change our place in the evolutionary chain because we are able to cooperate. And to cooperate is possible because every one of us develop a theory of mind on someone else. I see you and I imagine that you have an hands, you have will, you have patience like me. This is the way in which the dog domesticate us, These big eyes, we have a theory of mind. He loved me. No, actually, he sees sausages, but okay. we domesticate the dog. Well, the problem is that such kind of tools are starting to allow us to develop a theory of mind on them. And that start to have some feeling, some kind of confidence and trust. But they are machine made to maximize the interaction things. So the problem is not if they will become a religion or not religion, that we can trust to a statistical system as something that can give us life or death. And that is simple dangerous. So we need to be trained. The real enabling platform is the human beings. As we see, we need to train us.
There's a follow-up from Rita. She asks, how do religious authorities adapt in this era of AI? And what does this mean for our humanity if AI does become super intelligent?
Okay. I have a timer here. I'm looking like, when a football, the time is going, you are winning the game. Okay, let's go straight on that. It's not the first time that it happened. Last time that the language technology was changed, that was the printing press, a lot of things changes and religious changes. Before there is one reader and everyone was hearing, then everyone has his own Bible and start the personal interpretation. and things not always go well, we have some fight. What is the next step? I know that you love my diplomatic way to say things. The challenge here is that with such kind of AI, everyone can have his own text. And so where is the truth? Where is something that I can trust on? I spend my elementary time painting and coloring a mushroom, red mushroom with white dots. That I found a source that convinced me that it's better to not eat it. This is a reliable source. I have not everything that I need in my instinct. I need that someone pass to me such kind of competence. The same thing is on faith and religious belief. So the problem of having such powerful machine is that we are not sure that we are passing to the next generation only trustable sources. And this is a challenge not only for religion, but for human culture.
What a great note to end on. Oh, thank you so much. We'll certainly continue to follow this story. Father Benanti, Amandeep, Singh, Gill, Kate, Kallot, thank you so much for joining us here today. Stay with us. We have more conversations ahead. Thank you.